When I was growing up, my Aunt Clara was the quiet one in the family. She never married, never talked much about her past, and always smiled like someone who carried a secret no one could ever guess. I loved her since I was little. She baked the best apple pies, told the most beautiful bedtime stories, and had a laugh that sounded like a song. Still, something in her eyes always looked distant, as if part of her lived in another time. I was 24 when I found out about her secret. It happened one spring afternoon when I was helping her clean out her attic. The place was filled with the soft smell of cedar and dust, with boxes stacked high and sunlight slipping through tiny cracks in the roof. I remember brushing off a stack of old books when I noticed a small wooden chest tucked in the corner, almost hidden under a pile of faded quilts. It was locked, but the key was right there, tied to a piece of ribbon. When I opened it, I found letters, dozens of them, tied together with an old silk ribbon that had turned pale with time. My aunt was downstairs making tea, so I didn't open them immediately. But something about that box, that faint scent of old paper and perfume, made my heart race. I took it downstairs to her and said, "Aunt Clara, I think I found something of yours." She froze. I had never seen her that way before, her hands trembling, her expression turning almost pale. Then she smiled softly, took a deep breath, and said, "Oh, you found them." I didn't know what "them" meant, but as she sat down, she gestured for me to join her. "You're old enough now," she said quietly. "I suppose it's time you knew." She untied the ribbon, and for a moment, she just stared at the first letter as though it was a window into a part of her soul she hadn't looked at in years. Then she handed it to me. "It began with this one," she whispered. The letter was dated June 12, 1977. It was from a man named Henry Parker. He wrote about meeting a girl by the lake near his hometown, how she wore a yellow dress and how her laughter echoed through the trees. As I read, I realized he was writing about Aunt Clara. The words were tender, full of admiration and quiet longing. It was clear, Henry loved her. I looked at her, stunned. "Who was he?" I asked. She smiled, eyes glistening. "Henry was the love of my life," she said softly. "But we weren't meant to be." Then she told me everything. She had met Henry when she was 21. Back then, she had just moved to Maplewood, a small town surrounded by hills and lakes, to work as a librarian. Henry had been a local mechanic, funny, hardworking, and kind. They met by accident when her car broke down near the lake road. He fixed it, refused to take money, and invited her to grab a milkshake at the diner nearby. That was the beginning of a story that would shape both their lives. For 2 summers, they were inseparable. They spent evenings walking along the lake, talking about books and dreams. Henry would sketch her as she read on the pier, and she would write him small notes, tucking them into his jacket pocket. He made her laugh like no one else could. And she made him believe in something bigger than himself. But then came the storm. Henry got an offer to work in another state, a chance to build a career he had always wanted. Clara wanted him to go, to chase his dream, but he didn't want to leave her. For weeks, they argued, cried, and wrote letters they never sent. Finally, Henry left, promising to come back for her once he settled. He did write, every week. His letters were full of hope and love. But one day, the letters stopped coming. A few months later, Clara found out through a friend that Henry had been in a car accident on his way to visit her. He didn't survive, as Aunt Clara told me. Her voice broke. She didn't cry loudly. She just held the last letter close to her chest, whispering, "I kept waiting for one more letter, just one." But it never came. After Henry's death, she never fell in love again. She stayed in Maplewood, built a quiet life, and poured her heart into helping others, teaching children, volunteering at the library, caring for neighbors. Her heart had been broken, but she never grew bitter. She said she wanted to live in a way that would make Henry proud, and somehow, that thought kept her going. When she finished her story, there was a long silence between us. The afternoon sun had shifted, filling the room with golden light. I reached for her hand and said, "You were so brave, Aunt Clara." She smiled faintly. "No," she said, "I was just in love." That night, I couldn't stop thinking about her story. I went back upstairs and reread some of the letters. They were full of poetry and dreams, of promises written in a time when words were everything. I began to understand that love doesn't always mean a lifetime together, it can mean carrying someone in your heart forever. A week later, I came up with an idea. I started typing out every letter she had kept and arranged them in order, along with her memories. It took weeks, but by the end, I had turned it into a small book. When I gave it to her, she wept. "This is our story," she said. "I never thought anyone would care. But I did, because her story wasn't just about loss, it was about courage, loyalty, and finding beauty even after heartbreak. It taught me something I'll never forget. That love isn't always loud or perfect, but when it's real, it lasts far beyond time." Months later, Aunt Clara's health began to fade. She grew weaker, but she never complained. One evening, as I sat by her bed reading one of Henry's letters aloud, she smiled and whispered, "He's waiting by the lake." Those were her last words. After she passed, I went to the lake she always talked about. The sun was setting, the same soft golden hue she loved. I brought the box of letters with me and sat there for hours, watching the water ripple. I read their first letter aloud, and when I was done, I tied the ribbon around the stack and placed them gently in the water, letting them float away. I could have sworn, for a brief moment, that I saw two figures walking by the shore, one in a yellow dress, one in a worn jacket, hand in hand. It's been years since then, but every time I visit that lake, I bring flowers and whisper thank you, for reminding me that love, even when lost, can still shape who we are. My Aunt Clara's story changed me. It made me believe that love isn't about endings, it's about how deeply it transforms us. And even though her love story ended too soon, it still lives on, in every heart that dares to love without fear.